come to the school, you have to have your temperature readings. Everyone has to wear a mask in the train. So when this thing happens, we have to make a change. There's no alternatives. So I agree that with Professor Howard that sustainability is a key issue. So actually, after listening to your talk, I'm thinking maybe you can initiate some kind of certificate for the sustainability. So each person with the behavior or the institute behave like a sustainability criteria. You can put a mark on it. This is the agency, this is the institute which meet sustainability requirement. So I think that kind of things might be helpful. And that's my personal view.
I guess I shouldn't say anything.
Try this one.
Okay, will you? Okay. I think you could probably hear me anyway. The only thing I wanted to follow up on another side, which is that I am working in this Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, and one part of that, 1/3 of the institute, is a cluster directed by Mark Lawrence, who's an atmospheric chemist, who in fact got his degree with Paul Crutzen. And one of the important things that we're doing, we're involving both students and postdocs and so forth, but also trying to work very broadly in the public in trying to take these ideas into a broader public domain to get public action on these. So we're working on a film project now. We're working with science museums, and we're working with the universities. And the reason I say this is that I think it's I mean, what you're doing is exactly in this kind of model, that it's not just this very rich science and academic material, but that academic material and fundamental research material is also the material that we need to make understandable to a very broad public, and not only to the university students, but to younger students and to their parents more broadly. And I think there are lots of ways that can be done. One of the things that Mark Lawrence has done, I think with great insight, is to really involve in the group that works on modeling of the atmosphere and short-lived climate warming pollutants and climate engineering, is to involve people involved in law, in psychology, in anthropology, in sociology. These are all people who are actually in the group and work on a daily basis together to try to build this kind of a broader public action. So I just suggest that there may be interesting ways to really build this as a coherent effort. Thanks.
Professor Hopkins.
I'm getting a message.
Yes, you could cut off. Can you explain why you predict fewer typhoons? You know, we have these predictions that come forth, and they just don't seem to make sense. And if we're putting more energy building up so that, you know, both the land and the water are warming slightly, you would think that the typhoons not only would become slightly more severe, but why would the conditions be that there would be fewer? Just an easy question.
Right, yeah. Actually, this is also a key question in climate research. Because this is a good question, and typhoon has a great impact, and also hurricane as well. Now, the analysis of the past data shows that the variability, or you can say the magnitude of the typhoon, the strength, the wind speed, and also the rainfall produced by the single typhoon has changed a lot. But the total number of the typhoon still requires lots of research and the data to do that. The reason for that is because we are dealing with non-linear systems. This is a non-linear system. You punch one, so you expect there's 1 millimeter deep. You punch 2 times force, you expect 2 times force. No, you don't do that. You keep punching, there's no response. You keep punching, but you know when the table collapses. This is a non-linear system. You don't know that data. So the reason for our lack of that kind of understanding is because we do not have sufficiently good quality of the data. So that's the value of the satellite data. We need to work very hard to try to get more data, especially over the tropical ocean, and to know their behavior, because most of us live on a very limited land area. We don't live over the oceans, only fish live over there. But and also we live underground. We don't live in the stratosphere or ionosphere. But now we understand that the Earth is a carbonic process. So your information, I believe, are basically from the limited model simulations or the limited data analysis. But to be able to work out in a longer time scale, we need to have a good quality data in paleoclimatology to see the proxies of the quality of the data so that we can have a better understanding. But for the moment, there's one thing for sure, the variation has become very big. The amplitude of each typhoon, but the total number of typhoons, that's still an issue of the future, requires future research. A recent research by the Japanese institute, they use Earth simulators. The simulation, if you believe the model gives you the right answers, but the model, they are built based on a very limited understanding. You have to understand that. They see this kind of the behavior as well. And also the hurricane and the typhoon at different basins, they are quite different. So that's what makes Earth science very, very exciting as well. For example, in my talk, I show about the hurricane over the North Atlantic. Now we understand the dust from the Sahara Desert. They can have an impact on the generation of hurricane. But no prediction model, they have dust in their model. They don't predict the dust. So how can we know the future climate? They don't dust, but dust can have an impact on the hurricane. And also volcano eruption. The volcanic ash, they can change the vertical stability of the air. So they can change a lot of things. So this kind of thing is that's a great challenge. It's quite exciting as well. So yeah.
When we talk about the ethic, and there's an issue about the science, the uncertainty of science, scientific forecast. So when talking about the global warming or everything regarding the future generation, what kind of situation they have to face, we have to have a concern about the uncertainty of science. Don't believe in we have totally understanding the whole system. We only have a limited data or limited information. We are talking about environmental ethics. About in my issue, when we discuss the issue, then always we keep in mind we don't pretend we are the God. We know exactly what's right. This is my comment on this issue. Thank you.
We can also raise questions for Professor Cai and Professor Xu. We should let Professor Wang take a short break. Any questions?
I have a comment or a question to Professor Tsai. Can you go back a few slides? Because one of the slides went a little too fast for me. No, farther down, it was close to the end. Close to the end. Go to the end and then back up.
back. Yeah, no, there was that one. It was that one. Thanks.
This one.
No, yeah, not that one.
This one.
This one, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know what the source was for that. No, I couldn't help but sort of reflect over the second point there. Embodying responsible consumption. And of course, we all want to support sustainable development in local communities and regions. What I couldn't help but think when I see this is that obviously responsible consumption is very important. I mean, it's obviously very important. I'm just wondering, is this some sort of an exhaustive list of what ULSF is up to? Because I couldn't help but think, well, you know, we are more than consumers, or we should preferably aspire to be a little bit more than responsible consumers. And I just felt a little bit of a tendency here to sort of an appeal to consumer sovereignty, that if we only get our consumption right, all of the problems will be solved. And I think it has, in an age, and I'm getting back to what I said earlier, and please excuse me if I'm harping on my points here, but in an age when there's massive dispossession going on of commons, and when the production side is so important, I think it's also very responsible to think in terms of more than our role as a consumer, because that would tend to get us to identify as that's what we are basically, and if we can do something, it's through how we change our consumption. Because there's, I mean, we've heard so much today. It's the end of a long day. We all know, I'm not saying anything new to anybody here, we can do a whole lot more than change our consumption. And I can't help but think, I also just want to, I don't know if this is a sidetrack, but I want to back up Elon Chabet's point about the data. I mean, yes, this is extremely important. Obviously, but there's also a whole lot of social and economic data which you rightly say could very, very well be related and brought in, and I think it's a very admirable project that you mentioned. But yeah, and one thing I'd like to toss in here is this. I couldn't help when I was thinking about this, that there's and that's something we haven't heard very much about, but I thought about when you have the list there: peace and human security. Peace and human security. Last time I was in Taiwan, there was an IHDP conference with a focus on human security, and you know, one of the consequences of the massive dispossession is that there are many people that are being forcefully evicted and moved, and that might be sometimes hard to relate to natural phenomena. But if you look at like the tsunami, we saw the 26th of December mentioned in one of the presentations. If you look at what happened after the tsunami, I mean, the tsunami was not the major problem for very many people. The major problem for very many people around coastal Indian Ocean, that's what happened when their governments and when powerful interests of capital started to utilize the opportunity to displace people and take over resources and utilize their coastal areas. And of course, the worst case is the country of Sri Lanka, which had a massive program to dispossess people and displace them. And you can hide behind the natural phenomenon and say it's a natural disaster. But what happened after the tsunami was actually social disasters of a large scale. And I would like to include that as part of the concept of resilient communities. Because a resilient community needs to be able to stand up to the state and to powerful economic interests, and not lie flat. We need strong civil society for a sustainable society.
Well, I totally agree with you. Yeah, that's why
Well, this is come from when we are talking about green university, and there are a lot of some actions, and one of that is talking about broad, maybe already broad concern. But my question actually in my presentation, I actually want to challenge the green university concept. Not this concept is the content is not. We shouldn't just limit our thinking, our own behavior in the campus as a good citizen in the campus only. We should learn more broadly, concern about some unequal ecological exchange or the more other things, which is basically come from social sciences. I think it's very important. So beyond our own consumption is, but when we do the consumption, which like today, we should think about who behind that, something like that, and the equal distribution of the earth. It is something I totally agree with you. Okay, Professor Gleason.
Works.
I'm finding this conversation interesting in many ways, and I think I'm going to maybe raise some other issues. I think that when you're actually talking about reasonable or responsible consumption, I think that given where we are, you are talking about second order change, because we're so far from what constitutes any kind of responsible notion of consumption. So I think in many ways, I think, Eric, that you may be trivializing, and it may seem as though it's a non-issue. When you're talking about dealing with societies or companies or universities talking about becoming zero net carbon, the scale and character of issues that they have to deal with institutionally, socially, culturally, the interwoven elements of those issues are of such a character that there's a whole series of different steps and ways of thinking and changing in ways of thinking that are involved. But I also want to go back to Professor Wang's issues again about data. The scale and character of the issues that we're facing are ones in which information is a necessary condition, but by no means a sufficient condition for the scale and character of meaningful behavior change. In most cases, everything that we need to know about climate change, behavior change, we knew 30 or 40 years ago. We knew when the Limits to Growth report came out. We don't need to have the scale of information that you're talking about, though it's tremendously important and very, very interesting. We don't need that information to know that we have to vastly reduce our energy consumption to even come remotely close to addressing the kinds of quality of life issues that Eric's talking about. But we don't do it, and we haven't done it. And so I guess that's the question that I want to go back to. You know, if I think from those of us outside, you know, Taiwan seems like, in many ways, in terms of decision making, in terms of the role of academics in relationship to government, it seems like, you know, a paradise. When you compare how decisions are made in the U.S., you, as Eric mentioned, you'd be having this conference, and the people are taking it seriously. And in my conversations with Professor Ye on Tuesday, we talked about, you know, where you could have meaningful collaboration. One of the projects that I've been trying to work on in my community is collaborative community sustainability indicators. In Taiwan, you could have a really meaningful community sustainability indicators project that was locally driven, but generating information that was directly tied to decision making, not just on a local basis, but on a national scale basis. That's the kind of information that I think, could be tremendously important in terms of improving quality of life. Has that been something that you're thinking about?
Handprint, do something. They're talking about handprint.
Yeah,
Not only blueprint, to do a handprint, to change something. Then I don't know whether I misunderstand. This morning when Professor Hopkins talking about handprint, and we do something.
I think that the handprint idea is a heuristic. In many ways, just like the ecological footprint is really a heuristic. It's not useful on a meaningful scale for local decision making, because anytime you look at any kind of single indicator, it's just as if the same issues we were talking about, sort of monetizing decision making, the same issues come up with looking at ecological footprint, because you can't look at all the things that are important in making these decisions by trying to use a surrogate of land to reflect a whole series of different criteria that are not commensurable.
No, I just want to say that I think we're actually in agreement, and I honestly do agree with it. I tried to say initially that it's very important, responsible consumption. It wasn't, my point was not so much that there was something wrong with that point. My question was more like, is this an exhaustive list? This is the only slide about ULSF. And so my point was about this is very important, and I agree entirely. It was mentioned by Professor Hopkins at the beginning of the day, and I couldn't help but sit there and think, yes, you're right. I mean, we who can afford it need to make those kinds of decisions. My comment was only directed to the, is this an exhaustive list? Because in that case, it's pretty weak, because it's good, but it's not. It doesn't include as much as it should maybe.
Can I borrow your? Oh, yours says more details. Oh, okay. One question for Professor Xu, if I may, because you talked about the teacher development, teacher professional development, and also about risk issues, and there too, and I think this is maybe a theme that runs through this in terms of the learning aspect, which is the difficulty that I think we face in not only addressing the information, but in addressing the thinking skills, or the critical thinking, and the attitude towards the information processing, so that the models of teaching, I mean, I'm not familiar in Taiwan, this is my first visit, but in many other countries, still remains very knowledge-driven. And in dealing with disasters, as well as in broader education around climate change and around the general changing global conditions, that it's the capacity to learn and to learn to think that is so important. And I think that working with teachers is an excellent way. I mean, that's one point where you really have to address that. And I just would like to get your reflection on that, thoughts on that, if you would. Thank you.
Professor Xu, would you like to respond?
我用中文讲。在台湾就是知道你要帮我办，在台湾的师资培育比较这个强调知识的灌输，事实上那个问题解决跟创造思考这个部分啊，在一般识别教育里面都需要加强，因为面对灾害来的时候，实际的问题，所以这几年在这个部分啊，在防灾实务跟那个所谓解决学校问题跟学校管理这个部分，政府都有在加强这个部分的训练。
Thank you very much for this question. And Professor Xu asked me to shoot interpretation because he is doing the project and sponsored by my division. So that's my responsibility to explain what has been done, is done for my institution. And in the teacher preparation or teacher training in the field of the disaster preparedness education, currently still quite knowledge oriented. And but for the past few years, we kind of oriented a little bit to the emphasis on critical thinking, and problem solving. And in practice, we emphasize more on the drills, real drills, for the practice in the school setting, because we face the real problems in the earthquake and the flooding. Occurred frequently, so we ask the school to practice, to have drills every year. I think in September we have national drills for every school to have a real drill once in a year, or maybe once in a semester. So that's our response. Thank you.
May I make a comment here? I fully agree with Professor Chebe's point that we have to have a capacity to learn, and also capacity to learn to think. I also think we have to have capacity to learn to know what we don't know. There's still a long way to go. So I think that's very important that we in university have these opportunities. Also, in the reply to the Professor Harrell's comments, actually I got the book, Limits to Growth. I like the book, but I think the policymaker need to take scientists seriously than before. So I would suggest that those students in the university, they have a compulsory course to take environmental science, because a lot of politicians or the policymaker, they got a background as lawyers, so they need to take the scientific decision more seriously. I think that'd be good for our future generations. I also like to finally make a small comments to the Erics. You are talking about that we shouldn't hide behind the natural disaster. Indeed, we shouldn't hide behind that. Recently, I read an article from Science about the passing of one of the Nobel Prize in Economy, who is a woman. And she was, yes,
Helen Roster.
Indeed, yes. I read the article. One thing, a lot of things impressed me very much. But the first thing impressed me is she was doing the water management study for California in the beginning. And during the drought condition in California, several counties they have endured water shortage problem. But there's only one county. Even under the drought condition, they do not have any drought water problems. The reason for that is because of the water management. Given the natural water is the same, not much natural water provided, but most of the county they have water shortage, but only one county they don't have this problem. That's because of management. We have to take the management seriously. We cannot just hide behind the natural disaster.
Yeah, I have confessed, just thinking about the two questions we discussed, a little bit explain. Yeah, this is a long list and it's a very beginning, but I really want to respond at what Harold Glass just mentioned. In Taiwan, yes, university and community, the distance is short. So that's why we think university members, we need to have really responsible to what we know, what we should learn. Because in Taiwan, for instance, there are movements like local sustainability movement. Then the university played a role to help the local school and community to develop some programs. So it's always, we have regional responsibility from regional universities. So I think this is kind of our responsible, but we